Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to OCD Hi-Fi Guy. And today we have a wonderful guest with us, Nelson Pass. We're going to discuss some interesting things about amplifiers, words and specs that we hear that maybe we don't know what the heck they mean and what's important or what's not, and just get a little of the juice from the goose, if you will. So we will start off, as I understand it, Nelson. First of all, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it.
A pleasure to be here. Yes, of course.
You bet, man. And as I understand things, an amplifier on its own, just by physics, is somewhat of a kludge to build. It is you have to kind of overcome something that is not natural, as I understand it, and so it's kind of you have to make a lot of compromises. Do you know what I mean? And can you sort of give us a?
Well, you know, there are plenty of decisions to be made, and in my case, I deal in the high end, the generally more expensive versions of amplifiers that are designed for people who are fussier about what goes into it and what comes out. I don't know that kludge is the word, but there are, well, I mean, we could talk about that as if it was art. If you want to create art, you have a lot of choices that you might make. What media you work in, what kind of message that you're sending to the audience, what kind of audience you're sending that message to.
I got you.
Who you are, what you consider to be art. I consider the amplifier design, which is what I do. I treat it as art, and I treat the whole enterprise really. I treat as entertainment. In other words, the people who buy my amplifiers are managing to be entertained by what they can do for them. It may be a tool, but it's still part of an overall picture, and there's an aesthetic that comes with it, and people make choices. Do you want to get or buy or build a tube amplifier, or did you want a solid state amplifier of very high power and or tremendously great distortion specs, or do you want to have something that maybe alters the signal in subtle ways which please you, or at least fail to irritate you? So there are a lot of decisions that a customer is making, and of course the designer has to consider who he's designing for and what it is he's trying to achieve. I always have seen it just as I'm 50 years into it now. It's a creative outlet,
Sure.
And when you're involved in commercial enterprise, of course, there's actually a limit to the creativity that you can get involved in. You have to a certain amount of consistency and continuity is expected on the part of a designer in relation to a particular brand, which in my case was Threshold for many years, and then subsequently PASS Labs, which is still cooking away. And but that creative spark still exists. But when you're commercially successful, like I say, as in PASS Labs, there's a kind of a straitjacket that gets assembled around that, because people who are your customers, and dealers who are considered customers as well, and so on, they're looking for a certain amount of continuity. Yes, they want creativity. Yes, they want new, but they want it in a particular way that's familiar to them.
Sure.
Very often, I like to do things that are not familiar, and and because I enjoy it. It's interesting, and I always learn something from it. But I have learned to separate it out from the commercial enterprise, at least initially. And so I have, in the case of PASS Labs, after about 20 years or so, I created another company called First Watt, designed to be independent. Actually, it started out as just a kitchen table operation. It was just me having fun.
Yeah, man.
And, but it grew into something where
I've got a SIT 3 in the other room.
Well, there you are. And so but it became commercially successful. And when that happens, well, part of the thing is that if you're building them, then it's no longer quite that much fun. And when there starts to have some volume to it,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I turned that production over to PASS Labs, and it operates as kind of a secondary brand. But they're distinguished from each other so that there's a minimal amount of confusion.
Okay.
But at First Watt, I get to do anything I want.
Fired up.
You know,
Yeah.
the results be damned.
Yeah. For sure. That's great.
But amazingly, it hasn't impeded its success. But it is a very separate kind of thing, and it's a separate customer. It's low power Class A amplifiers, and each one makes a point of being in some way really different from the others, not necessarily in terms of power. And if you've looked at the chassis that I use, I have only one chassis for what is now on, I don't know, 11, 12 different models of amplifier. But don't look for any different chassis. There's only one.
That's great. I really dig that.
It's staying that way for quite a while. So, but the creativity is in the circuit.
For sure.
And that's where I get my jollies is playing with that, listening to the sound of that. And the other thing too, though, is that I get to explore the customer's reactions to this. I get to send it out. It doesn't have to particularly succeed, but it always brings back information about who my customers are, what they like, and maybe what they don't like.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, if I'm not mistaken, it seems like the designs that I've seen stick to a very simple and purist kind of an approach. Is that correct?
Oh, well, I love simple and purist. I mean, I think that the best sound comes from really simple circuits, put together elegantly. And the other thing about, brain fart.
Sidetrack.
Well, what's consistent. Oh, well, the other end, what I was going to say is that they're all being low power. It's a lot easier to make them simple. And
sure. Yeah.
But it's also my observation that the simple just continuously comes back. It sounds better as an approach. And like I said, low power helps with that. The other aspect about simple and why it tends to sound good is that the distortions and other imperfections tend to be of simple nature. The distortion that you look at in a small Class A amplifier if it's properly done, is second harmonic, third harmonic, very little of anything that goes into higher order harmonics, which are more annoying and audible. Many of the customer base like that second harmonic. Mm-hmm. Some of them even like the products where the dominant distortion is third harmonic. And while I don't deliberately aim at creating lots of distortion, I have discovered that people don't have a problem typically with like, for instance, second harmonic. It adds a little bit of personality to the presentation, and in some cases actually it helps out. Now, it's all an illusion when it does, and there's plenty of people out there who don't like it that way, or at least don't think they like it that way.
Right.
But I look at this and I say, well, it's a big industry, it's a big market.
Yeah.
If you have 1% of that market, you're doing quite well.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I only see myself as having to appeal to a very small percentage of the audiophile population for this to work. Yes.
Yeah. Now, so that brings me to a very interesting question, which is, because I almost see a juxtaposition between First Watt and PASS Labs. Okay, so if you could maybe expand on the difference between smaller watt, high efficiency speaker combination and larger power and less efficiency speaker. What the question that I wonder, why would anybody build a low efficiency speaker? Why would you build an 86 dB 4 ohm speaker and that needs a big amp? Is there something beautiful to be found there?
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure I've ever thought about the questioning quite that way. Um, what I personally deal mostly around here in high efficiency speakers, things that I've got some here right now in the 95 dB category.
Sure.
I take a certain pleasure in those. They're and of course in the marketplace you've got outfits like Klipsch is a fine example where
Yes.
they are still selling high efficiency speakers.
I love it.
And in the case of Klipsch, they'll take a lot of power if that's what you want to do, and they'll play really loud for that.
Yeah.
But to me, the charm is down at the ordinary levels. I don't tend to listen to things too loud, and of course, at least in the case of First Watt, I had the pleasure of just simply, pleasing myself.
Yeah. That's great.
It's whatever I happen to like. So
you earned it. Yeah.
but I've simply got plenty of things around here that are 90 dB plus. What you pick up with low efficiency speakers is you can extend the bandwidth on these things many times. In other words, typically a high efficiency speaker isn't going to do the deep bottom end with a lot of excursion. If you want a lot of excursion, you're going to need a motor mechanism that is got a little more dimension and weight to it. And when you do that, the efficiency will drop. Sometimes you just have to EQ those speakers to do it. And once again, the efficiency is gonna take a hit. Also, some people just like it loud. Upstairs, not down here in my little sound nook, but upstairs where my wife will listen. Also, if we're playing Pink Floyd.
Nice.
It'll get kicked up.
Oh yeah, sure, man.
And when the drums and the bass roll on out and splash around the floor,
oh yeah,
that's a very, very satisfying kind of thing to have. And those are not particularly efficient speakers. Down here, what I do is I keep a scope sitting on top of something here, often just the speakers, so that you can actually see what voltage is, what waveform is driving the loudspeaker. And that's a lot of fun. You don't want to really be distracted from the music per se, which it does. But when I have guests, I will go, okay, this is a 1 watt window in this screen. Any traces that you see within this window can be done by a 1 watt amplifier, and we'll sit here and it'll be playing pretty loud. And and it's not a watt yet. We're not at a watt yet.
No, it's like a paradox for me, because I have some high efficiency speakers. I also have some that are not so much. And I remember the first time testing out some 300B amps that were tube amps, and everybody had always said, oh, 300B, no highs, no lows. You can't, they're kind of weak, whatever. But I put them on some speakers that were mid 90s, to upper 90s. And man, I must have been in 4 watts, and it was louder than I could listen to. And I was listening to like electronic music on purpose to do a test. And I had it was highs, it was lows booming. They were dual 15s, and a full range in the middle on each side. And I was like, what are people talking about, man? I mean, I'm hearing everything. Granted, if we put it on a scope, it might have showed different. But my experience was that, I wouldn't want to play it any louder. And I probably have 4 watts going through these things,
95 dB speakers and a watt will make your neighbors pound on the wall.
Right.
No problem at all. And 95 dB is efficient stuff. I mean, there's very few speakers that make it up to 100.
Yeah.
And so, but the other thing too is I don't personally listen loud. I'm in my 70s. I'm still trying to preserve my ears.
Good for you.
You get a few more years out of these things. And but I keep a lot of full rangers around, and often I will put something on top of them to sweeten them up at 20K, and or put some bottom end below them, as my brother-in-law Kent says. Full range speakers make great mid ranges.
Yeah, typical. Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's amazing to me how a full range speaker can do such a broad frequency range and have it be coherent. I'm like, how is it doing all those vibrate. I mean, it's got to do fast vibrations and slow vibrations. How does one cone do that at the same? How can you do two different frequencies at the same time off one cone? It blows my mind how it works.
I think it's purely art. I think it's done by guys who spend all their time farting around with little modifications to design and seeing what they can do, and then they listen to it and they go, oh yeah, that's better, and suddenly that's the new model that company comes out. There's a list of about 5 outfits that I really like. There's Lowther, which is old traditional. There's Feastrex, which is no longer really with us, but had some wonderful drivers.
I just bought some. Yeah.
There's let's see. Lee Audio, LII out of China, is putting out some stuff these days. In less efficient versions of that, the Mark Audios and Foztex and
Cube too. You like Cube, don't you? Cube.
Well, I don't work with tubes typically.
No. Cube Audio.
Oh, Cube. Yes, of course. I'm sorry. Yeah. That's one. And I'm trying to think about the guys who Pure Audio Project is using. It's Voxative. Yeah. Well, that's just about the list right there.
Yeah. So the ones that I told you about that were blowing me away, those were Pure Audio projects with a Voxative in the middle.
Ah, well, you know, I designed the active crossover for that.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I think
Jeff came to us and said, "Oh, I really like your crossover. Can you make one for just, of course."
Yeah. Zev's a good guy. Yeah. So very.
That's absolutely. In fact, that's absolutely one of my favorites. The only problem I have is Desmond Harrington back at PASS Labs borrowed mine.
There they went.
Yeah, and I've got to get him to go beg Zev for another pair of those Voxatives.
There you go.
I have everything else here though, pretty much. In fact, I just hauled out of storage. If you can see this. This is part of what you can see. Or I can bend this around here.
Oh yeah,
the slobs. Okay, there's a slot loaded open baffles.
Yes.
And these are for the speaker camp, which is being held on the 24th of June.
Where?
And we're in Sebastopol, California.
Oh, cool.
And there's only a few people doing this, but I had many years ago, I collected, I bought out the inventory of, you may recall Moth Audio once upon a time. They made tube amplifiers and full range speakers.
What was the name?
Moth, M-O-T-H.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And they are no more, but I was offered the remaining inventory of their full range drivers, and so I scooped them up. Well, the last of those drivers are going into the speaker camp, into these slobs. Now, the slobs were created not because I wanted to get into the speaker business, but because I had a distributor who said, "Oh, I want to do a nice speaker to go on. I'm going to have a demo floor space." And I went, well, this is an opportunity for me. So I had designed this previously, so I had a bunch of them made.
Yes.
And he went, oh, no, I changed my mind. I'm not going to do that. Yeah. So off to speaker camp they are going.
Oh, excellent. Yeah,
and
there you go.